Hello and welcome. My name is Natty Cash, and I am back to do my annual Premier League predictions. Last year, I put my first Premier League predictions online, and this year, I'm doing it again. For the 2024-25 season, here are my Premier League predictions. First off, just to give a little bit of context on how I did last year, if you want to go watch that video, that's fine. It's still up on my channel, but I got 48 points. And again, that points is related to how far each of my predictions were from my predicted target. You add all up those points, and the lower you get as a score, the better. And so I got 48 points as my prediction. Let's see what we can do this year, and I will keep this updated year on year to see how well I do year upon year. But with all that said, let's get straight into it. I'm going to start from the bottom and make my way up until we get our predicted Premier League champion. Here we go. My first team to talk about in 20th position is Southampton. I know a lot of people have picked Southampton to be down here, and it's fairly typical, a newly promoted team, get them relegated again. My main reason is that I don't think Russell Martin as a manager is the best fit for having a team survive relegation. In his time at Swansea and then at Southampton last year, his approach is very much possession-based. But when you get promoted to the Premier League as a small club, being possession-based doesn't work because there's so many other teams that have higher quality players, can keep the possession more than you, and Southampton doesn't have that with Russell Martin at the helm. With him there, they're going to try to play possession similar to, say Burnley last year. They're going to try to then play well and be progressive on the ball, but it's not going to work, and they're going to suffer a fair bit. I do like them bringing in Ben Brereton Diaz, but I don't think that's going to be enough. They will get relegated, and I predict them to be in 20th place. And in 19th, I am going for Nottingham Forest. I don't believe Nuno Santos is a great fit for the manager of Forest. There seemed to be a lot of struggles at the end of last year, and I know that they had a points deduction, and we'll see if they have a points deduction again or if not. But I don't think Forest has enough gumption to stay up this year. This is now their third season up in the Premier League. The only thing that I would see them being successful with is if they got a different manager in and they were able to motivate them to be a little bit better defensively. But I see Forest letting in a lot of goals and not a whole lot of product on the other end. And so I do think Forest is going to struggle here, and they are going to be my team in 19th place. Then I have Leicester City sitting in our 18th position in our other relegated spot. Couple things that are going to be against Leicester here. Losing Maresca to Chelsea and bringing in Steve Cooper. It's tough to do that when you get promoted and then have a changed philosophy or a changed manager. So I think that's going to be very difficult for Leicester to overcome. The second thing is this looming points deduction that's going to be happening. Is that going to affect Leicester? Are they going to have the capacity to pull themselves out of that? Perhaps, maybe, and again, this is why I have them at 18th, because potentially Steve Cooper can rally them enough to then get them to survive, but I think they're just going to miss out. They're going to get relegated again, and they're sitting at 18th. The next one I have here is Brentford, just missing relegation, sitting at 17th. I think this is maybe this is a bold move, as Brentford has done well over the last years that they've been in the Premier League. And if they have Ivan Toney for most of the year, they're going to be decent offensively. But I also am looking for, what else are they bringing to the table? You can't really stay just stagnant, consistent, and be able to survive. And because they were drawn into a little bit of a relegation battle towards the end, again, because of points deductions, they kind of stayed above Forest and above Everton. But really to see Brentford further down, I think is kind of where we're going to see them this year. Hopefully not, but I do worry about Brentford, and they're just going to survive relegation in 17th. And in 16th position, I'm going with Ipswich Town. Now, I choose this, carefully, because even though last year all three Premier League or championship teams that came up got relegated, that is actually fairly rare when you look at the landscape of the Premier League. Usually there's at least one team. Even if you look at 2 years ago, every team that got promoted stayed up, and there were 3 new teams that were relegated. So you have to take that with a grain of salt, that it's always the case that every team that gets promoted gets relegated again. I think for Ipswich, I know there's a lot against them because, you might say, well, they were just in League One a couple years ago, so a lot of their squad is not going to be experienced for the Premier League. But I think their momentum, and at least for this year, their momentum is going to keep them in games. The crowd is at home is really going to be supportive, and I do think Ipswich can stay in the Premier League another year. We'll see if that's consistent. They also were able to keep their manager, which even though he was almost getting pulled to, I think it was Brighton and Chelsea were some names being listed for him. But he's here, he's stayed, and he is allowed to lead Ipswich in the Premier League, which I think is to their benefit, and they are going to survive being in 16th position. Now, as we get into 15th, I do think there's a little bit of a line between Ipswich and the teams below, and now 15th with the Wolves here, Wolverhampton. I think that Wolverhampton is not really going to be drawn into a relegation battle, although I do see that there could be struggles there. Gary O'Neill did well to take over last year. I had thought the Wolves were going to get relegated last year after Lopetegui left very abruptly, but I think O'Neill has done a good enough job to keep them stable. I don't really know how much they're going to really push forward or be competitive towards the middle of the table or the top half. So I do see them sitting kind of in this 15th position. And next I have Bournemouth in 14th. This might be lower than what other people have put them down as. My main reason for this is I believe in the manager. I think they're doing a great job. I am just concerned about the departure of Solanke to Tottenham. I will see what they can bring in and what kind of offense they can produce from there, but I feel like there's going to be a little bit of a struggle and a change there without Solanke in the lineup, someone that's been reliably part of the offense for Bournemouth during their time in the Premier League, and I think it's going to be a bit of a change and a conversation. Now, I haven't dropped them further than 14th, but I think this will be a little bit of a rebound year. Potentially they can bring in some key players for the money they got for Solanke and be able to bounce back, but I have them sitting in 14th. In 13th, I have Everton. Now, I have Everton up here mainly because this is approximately where Everton would have finished without the points deduction last year. And I think Everton is solid enough. I think Sean Dyche has done a good enough job to be very tough defensively, which allows you to stay in games. And I think Everton had, I think, the 4th best goals against in the Premier League. They just need some more offensive product, right? And that's where there's going to be some concerns about Everton. Can you score the goals that you need? But if you have a really tough defense and can play tough defensively, you're going to stay in games longer, and you're going to be able to either turn losses into draws or draws into wins, which I think that Everton will do good enough to then sit, again, just a little bit off mid-table-ish. They're going to be in 13th position. And in 12th position, I have Crystal Palace. Now, I do think, Crystal Palace has been fairly good at being consistently right in this mid-table position. They have been 12th, 11th, 10th over the last 3 years. I do see them dropping a little bit, just back down to 12th, but being consistent around here. They did lose Michael Elise, which I think it might be a tough loss, and we'll see what they can do with that. But they've lost players in the past. They lost Zaha and others, and I do think that Crystal Palace can maintain that and sit in this 12th position. Yeah, I know that Roy Hodgson is not at the helm anymore, but maybe Crystal Palace can stay here and make this consistent enough, and I think Crystal Palace can be consistently sitting in 12th. And next I have Brighton in 11th. Now, Brighton and Hove Albion have done really well since coming up, and with De Zerbi at the helm, they did very well. Now with De Zerbi gone, I think he's gone to Marseille. I'll be interested to see if they can continue that balance. Now, even when Graham Potter left and De Zerbi came in, Brighton has always been able to bounce back, and I think that's been one of their strengths. If they can continue that, I see them kind of right in this area. I am concerned potentially that they'll drop down if they didn't get the managerial appointment right, but for now, I am sitting Brighton here at the 11th position. And with number 10, I have gone with Fulham. Now, this is probably where I'm going to get the most flack. I anticipate Fulham can have a good year. When I look at most of the teams in the mid-table, I don't see a lot of movement of quality players coming into the club. Fulham, I know, has lost Paulinho, and there's been rumors of them losing Mitrovic, but them bringing Emile Smith-Rowe, I think, is a good addition. Just someone that couldn't get into a very deep Arsenal squad, I think could do very well at Fulham. And I think they could really push, and they've been a team that I think have gotten better, not worse. I could be wrong in that, so this is kind of my dark horse of saying Fulham are going to push on and be in our number 10th position. And in number 9, I have West Ham. And this is where I think is a really interesting part of the table, because I think West Ham are a level above of all the teams that I've talked about, but are not really above the point of surpassing the teams ahead of them in the table. And so West Ham, I think, are kind of stuck in this number 9 spot. They've got quality players. I like them bringing in Fulkrug as a striker. I think they needed someone that can be consistent in that position, and I think that's a good draw. I think they might be getting Wan-Bissaka as a defensive right back. We'll see what they can do here. Lopetegui, if he sticks around and can motivate them, I think West Ham can do fairly well. But I think this is kind of their glass ceiling at the moment, is that number 9 is really as best as they're going to be able to do. They're going to be able to do well against the teams below the table and struggle against the teams above them. And so I have West Ham sitting in 9th. In 8th, I have Newcastle. Again, now as we take a look at the top 8 teams, it's tough to really put any of them into a specific spot. I have put Newcastle as 8. I do feel like they have quality players. I just don't know how much of those players they've, that are really just going to continue to do what they're doing, and they haven't really brought in anyone of substance to help bolster that lineup. So quality players, can they do more than this? Possibly, but again, everyone else above them has high quality players as well, and so I'm putting Newcastle down here at 8th as kind of the bottom of our top 8, if you want to call it that. Then 7th, I've got Manchester United. This one's a tough one for me because I'm trying to figure out what can Manchester United do. They've, can get good results against teams above them. You saw that with Manchester United winning the FA Cup. But then they really struggle in certain parts as well. And so I don't really know where to put Manchester United. And because of that potential inconsistency, I am putting them in 7th because I don't really see them. They could push on and do well, but I think there's other teams that have done well to either recruit or have a pedigree better than them at the moment. Manchester United fans, again, you could prove me wrong, and they could go up into the top four, but I am hedging my bets right now and saying that Manchester United are going to finish in seventh. Next is Chelsea. And again, I am hedging my bets with Chelsea because they could be above this and get into the top four, or they could drop down into 10th. I'm not really sure. The one thing that I don't like is how recycled all their managers seem to be. They had Pochettino. Pochettino got them up to 6th, and they fired him. Now they have Maresca in here, and potentially he can do well with the squad at Chelsea, but I think there's lots of players here, and you have to kind of trim down the squad and be able to settle into a 11 that are going to play consistently and remove some of the players that are not. I think within time, if they gave Maresca time, that Chelsea could push their way into the top four again. But I think this is probably a year too soon. And so I'm pulling in the reins a little bit and saying Chelsea are going to finish 6th. Now, this is where it gets tough. I think the top 5, the 3 teams I talked about, Newcastle, Chelsea, Man United, I think there's a level there behind the next teams here. Aston Villa, I've put as kind of the unlucky team to not be in the top 4. It is very consistent that teams that jump into the Champions League sometimes have a tough time staying in the top 4, fixture congestion, all of that. However, I do think Aston Villa will stick around and be towards the top. I really believe that Unai Emery has done an excellent job here at Aston Villa and is going to continue to do that. I just think Aston Villa are going to miss out on that top 4. Who knows, depending on our new Champions League rules, maybe this spot will be filled by Champions League players, and Aston Villa will be lucky to get in. But I think for now, Aston Villa has to stay here and be in 5th position. So that means in our top 4, I do have Tottenham getting in. I do believe Ange Postecoglou has done a great job. I underestimated how well he was going to do last year and did fairly well to push very close to Champions League. And I do think that this year they are going to cross that barrier. Bringing in Solanke, I think, solidifies that striker position, where then, when they had Richarlison or others in that striker position, I don't think necessarily fit after Harry Kane's departure. I think Solanke fits that position very well, and to have either Kulusevski and Son on either side, or whoever they choose to be the wingers, I think will be a potent offensive force, and I think they will push their way into this number 4 position. Tottenham will be right here. So with number 3, I have Liverpool, and this one was tough. I went back again looking at results from last year, and Liverpool last year were not far off of the 2 above this, right? Arsenal, Manchester City, but I still kept them at 3rd, even though Jurgen Klopp is left and Slot is coming in. I do think that Liverpool can still fit into this 3rd position. I just think that instead of them being as close to the top 2, they're going to then be closer to the 2 teams below them, Tottenham and Aston Villa, and it's going to be a battle, maybe a 3-team battle or a 4-team battle to try to fit the last 2 Champions League spots. I do think Liverpool still have the quality to do so. I could see them dropping off and being below this. However, I am going to stick that Liverpool are going to remain in 3rd this year. And with number 2, I have picked Manchester City. Now, I could be wrong. I did this last year, and I picked Arsenal to win the league. And again, it was back and forth between who out of those 2 teams would win the league. Manchester City have been so consistent and so dominant that absolutely they can go and win their 5th straight one. I think the only difference is this. Manchester City are now pulling back a little bit, right? Selling Alvarez, and being able to, maybe wait for this breach result to the FFP breaches to be resolved. I don't know if they're going to be doing a lot of incoming business. However, they do have a very strong squad, and again, they could once again go with this as long as Haaland, De Bruyne, Rodri are healthy, that they could continue to push forward. Again, it's kind of a tough position for me to say, okay, well, yes, Manchester City could win again. I do think there's going to be a change, and that Manchester City will be second this year. It's going to be a close battle, but I have picked City to be second, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk about our number one team. So with Arsenal being our number one spot, this is the reason why I've picked Arsenal. I think bringing in some more depth defensively has done well. I think with Timber coming back from injury is also going to feel like a new signing. I think there's lots of depth in their attack, and I do feel like Arsenal are going to be able to push and be able to make this leap again, and actually be able to be our league champions. Now that's again a lot on faith and a lot of changes here, but that's what I think Arsenal is capable of. I think there's going to be an extra goal to say Arsenal want to win the league, and there's going to be a lot more motivation to be able to push past City and actually make it happen this year. Again, that's a lot on faith, but that's my pick, Arsenal as Premier League champions. So here is a final recap of the entire table. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Please like and subscribe. One thing I am going to be doing this year is I'm going to try to do some prediction videos and more soccer videos, as well as then some NFL content as well, and other sports that may come up. So please follow along. Thank you so much for watching, and leave some comment below. See you next time. Bye for now.